everyone, in this video I'm going to help you through the first part of the recreation for the short story, Don't Pass Me By. So you should have your document open, and I'm going to open up the text here. You're probably going to have to jump between the two. Please feel free to pause the video whenever you need. So we're going to start reading the story and completing the recreation. Remember, on the left side we have key details from the story like character, setting, and problem. And then on the right side, whenever we see a key detail that we think is going to be important to the central idea of the story, like it might point to the theme or something, we're going to put it on the right side too. Okay, so here we go. Don't Pass Me By Eric Gansworth. On the first day of 7th, Haley Sampson leaned against my homeroom's radiators. Her eyes said, "Don't blow my cover, Doobie, if you know what's good for you." The res school only took us to the end of 5th, and then we were merged into the massive junior high just beyond our border. There, among the 900 white kids and a handful of black kids, we each made decisions about how Indian we appeared, and we respected each other's choices. Haley snapped her eyes at the beadwork keychain on my backpack. Did she recognize it was the one made by her aunt? Margaret Sampson, June 1975, was written on the soft tanned leather backing. Even now, a year after Margaret had made it, the keychain held up. It was the gift I'd received at the moving up dinner held at our elementary school. Adult beadwork class members, mostly city Indian grandma types, and younger res ladies made them all for the levels of Indian graduates. Elementary school, high school, and college. The class members were relearning beadwork skills they'd lost, or learning stuff their own mothers had refused to teach them. All right, I'm going to pause here because we have a name. Haley Sampson is one of our characters. So I'm going to write that in. And we don't know the name of our narrator yet. And we know the setting. That's in a school. It's a new school year. And, whoops, I don't want this maximized. You might have sensed a problem here, okay? We each made decisions about how Indian we appeared, and we respected each other's choices. So each Native American student is like deciding how Native American they want to be and how white they want to be, basically, because most of the kids at the school are white. So that certainly seemed like a problem to me. How Native American they want to be versus how white they want to be. So it's like they have to act or something. I'm going to put this in bold. It just looks a little bit better like this. You can do the same on yours. And this seems like such an important topic because it's like the identity of the characters, like who they are. So I'm just going to copy and paste that. I think that could be a central idea of the story. Okay. They're talking about the keychain. I didn't have any keys yet, so I just looped mine on my backpack zipper tongue. My keychain was a Buckhead, and my last name was Buckman, so that was a cool matchup. The kids I should have left elementary school with, like Haley, got a turtle keychain at moving up. I loved mine, but the Buckhead reminded me that I had failed kindergarten. When you screw up taking a nap and playing with finger paint, nobody forgets. And if you did happen to forget, Carson Matstick had given me a helpful nickname, Hoobie Doobie the Flunked Out Booby. All right, so now we have our protagonist name. His last name is Buckman. And here it says Hoobie, but we're going to learn later, like at the very end, his first name is Hubert. So character number 2 is Hubert Buckman. And he is the narrator. He's telling the story. We each adapted to our new lives differently. Haley and Carson wrapped themselves in white-haired kids and white kid hairstyles and clothes, but you knew they were Indian as soon as you saw them with us. Bill and Andy Cruz, two cousins who I met in kindergarten do-overs, were dark like me. We had fewer options if we wanted to disguise ourselves. Older and bigger than every kid in my class, I stuck out. Even before my beaded keychain, I refused to try passing for a kid from the Italian suburbs or passing for a tanned farm boy. Strangers would know exactly where I was from. I have a big hockey Indian nose, thick lips, and long black hair tied back in a sneway. I don't know how to pronounce that. Sneway? Now past its second summer. So past its second summer, that means it's 2 years old. When I didn't braid it, you could see it was uneven and split. Haley's Sampson's dad was white, so people said she had half Indian blood, which I thought was bizarre. Did she bleed different colors depending on where she got cut? This half blood allowed her to almost cover up any visible trace of us. She was better at her disguise than Carson, and he moved easily between the groups, like he wore skin camouflage. The only thing giving Haley away were her Indian eyes, and I don't mean they had a melodramatic tear dangling out of them like a pull chain. They were just deep, deep brown, the color of a horse. Okay, so he's talking about how dark the kid's skin is. His skin is very dark, Haley's skin is very light. So Haley and Carson are so light they pass for white, or they try to. Main character has dark skin, and he doesn't pass. He doesn't sound like he wants to pass as white, whereas the other kids sound like they do want to pass for white. So that's connected to like who they are, their identity. That's like a big thing. He doesn't really care about passing for white. He seems to like support and kind of embrace his Native American heritage, unlike some of his classmates. Late spring, after Haley's mom died, Haley had racked up enough days absent to win herself a repeat year, so we became classmates again. I thought I'd show her the ropes about being an official failure, but that first morning in homeroom, Haley sported a new wild look beyond the usual human colors. Her face shimmered like a powdery pearl, slashed with maroon lips and lavender eyelids. Heavy black liquid gave her crow wings for eyelashes. Her purple black hair was sprayed into an explosion on the top of her head. It was like the white side of her head had wrestled the Indian side down for the count, but they both came out a little rougher. She was now with kids a year younger than her, and we were the only Indians in our section. She knew no one but me. I was used to flying solo since this place in the Big Indian Kid made white kids nervous, since my place as the Big Indian Kid made white kids nervous. By the middle of the day, she began to sit next to me. We just sat together silently, pretending like we didn't live a road apart. I knew when it was safe to talk. Those passing Indians, as soon as they got to the buses, suddenly they were like Indians again, like abracadabra. But if you tried to chat them up in school, prepare to be ignored. At the end of the day, I silently went to my locker and she went to hers. So you look kind of different these days, I said as we neared the safety bubble of res buses. What's going on up here? I motioned around her head. Soon as I can, I'm signing up for BOCES, she said, as if she hadn't ignored me all day. Gonna get my cosmetology license. Then, fast as we're out, I'll have the perfect job training. Can't sign up until 9th, so right now I'm practicing on myself and on my old Barbie glamour head. I nodded. My girl cousins had those heads too, perched in their bedroom dressers, slathered in makeup and sporting ratty spiked blonde halos. The dismembered Barbie heads freaked me out. The Barbies reminded me of the scary flying heads in the stories our Gramps told. He claimed those heads cruised around the res to catch kids awake past bedtime. After a while, I'd refuse to go to my cousin's room. Sometimes one of those girls would chase me with the Barbie head, making haunted noises if she felt especially evil and ambitious. You could use some sprucing up, Haley added. I could even those out. She touched the scroungy tip of my snayway, clucking at my split ends. So I imagine he wears his hair in a very long braid down his back because he hasn't cut his hair for 2 years at least. So I picture he wears his hair in a very long braid, clucking at my split ends. In the 2 years I'd been growing my long hair, it had never been touched by a girl. A dumb guy might think this would change how we talk to each other, but I knew better. The next morning, as soon as we left the bus, she got res amnesia again. I took what I could get. Okay, so Haley, who is trying to pass for white, totally ignores him. So main character is ignored by Haley. At the white school. So she's like avoiding, I'm not going to put her culture. Looks like she's avoiding everything she possibly can that has to do with being the fact that she's Native American. She just wants to avoid it when she's at the white school. She pretends like she doesn't even know the narrator when they're at the white school. But when they're back at the reservation, it's like, okay, everything's normal now. So lots of talk about like, okay, when can I act Native American? When do I need to try to act white? That's how Haley is. Hubert is the opposite. He doesn't try to act white. He doesn't try to blend in, whereas Haley does. But Hubert totally recognizes that my friends totally ignore me when they're around, when they're at the white school. Okay. All right. I hate this class, Haley whispered, not looking at me as we walked into health the third week in. You ain't alone, I whispered back, staring at the weird scene on the floor. Everyone hated health, where they forced you to talk in class about things you were discovering on your own in private. The first week, we blew through safe units on nutrition and hygiene, like flossing, the dangers of smoking, and gum disease. The stress and the body unit took up the second week. The textbook pictures weren't real stomach ulcers under stress, but instead drawings of pale pink organs, bunched like the paired socks your mom brought home from the laundry. Folks, I'd like you to read Recessa Annie, Mr. Corker said, hovering above this mysterious figure collapsed near his desk. He grinned, loving the small chaos he'd thrown us into, eyeing Haley for any bad reaction. Were we supposed to go to our seats, introduce ourselves? Were we supposed to gather around Annie like he was trying to herd us? We knew the splayed woman wasn't real. Her vinyl skin and scraggly, straw-colored, doll hair made her look like a special rough life anti-glamour edition of the giant Barbie head Haley had mentioned. This Annie at least had a body, but she seemed boneless or something. Her sneakered feet lay at weird angles flat against the classroom floor. She's not breathing, Mr. Corker said, trying to sell us on the idea she was alive. The room filled with silence as we stared at the lifeless jogger. Okay, he said with a loud, awkward clap. Recessa Annie is a simulator to help us learn to properly administer CPR. He paused and then elongated the next 3 words. Cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Now she is not a toy, he added, as if we'd suddenly tried to play with her. She is a lifesaver. That doesn't mean you can suck on her, Hubie, said Marco, one of the jerks in my class, his friends laughing. I wondered if Carson Mastick had told the white kids that I'd failed kindergarten, or if they just overheard him calling me Hubie Doobie the flunk out booby. Hey guys, Mr. Corker jumped in. These are exactly the shenanigans I warned about. Health is no joke. Okay, so we're in health class. Health class. Learning CPR. All this is taking place in a health class. Hey guys, Mr. Corker jumped in. These are exactly the shenanigans I warned about. Health is no joke. The laughters cupped hands around their grins like TV chimps. I wondered if Mr. Corker himself had a stomach under stress. This class used to do CPR towards the end of the year, but for us, it was going to be week 3. Maybe the ghost of Haley's mom and her heart attack haunted Mr. Corker. He had been Haley's teacher last year, and here she was again. I didn't ask if she failed CPR or if they just hadn't gotten to it in time. He seemed super aware of Haley when we walked in to find Annie, a waxy, blonde, dead, loose-limbed jogger in a heap on the floor. Haley looked down, matching Annie's blank stare. If you see someone in distress, you may be the only person around who knows what to do. Like Annie, you too could save lives. Then he performed the proper method step by step. So up here, he's mentioning this because Haley found her mom dead on the floor, much like Recessa Annie is laying on the floor, and kind of implying that maybe CPR could have saved her. We had to ask Annie if she was all right, touch her neck to try to find a pulse. We were then supposed to lean over, place an ear to her mouth, and pretend she might answer and breathe when we knew she wasn't going to cooperate. Mr. Corker tilted Annie's head back, pinched her nose, took a deep breath, and then locked lips with her, repeating the sequence a few times. It looks like she's gonna hurl, said Tom, one of Marco's grinning chimps, when her body heaved, filled with Mr. Corker's forced breath. That what happens when you try to kiss a girl, Doobie? Mark said to me, not bothering to cover his grin. Now that some guys had gotten growth spurts, they tested their manhood by poking the big Indian kid. They acted like they were running with the bulls, like we'd seen men do in our social studies unit on Spain, except in this case, I was the bull. Marco, Mr. Corker shouted, running an alcohol wipe along Annie's lips and onto her slightly exposed teeth. Here on the mouth, Tom, chest compressions. I know what that is. I don't know what that is, Tom said. You're gonna learn firsthand right now, Mr. Corker said, since you can't seem to pay attention otherwise. What if I don't want to? Detention and an F for this unit, your choice. Tom and Marco grumbled, bumbling to the floor. Mr. Corker talked them through the CPR basics, checking and clearing Annie's airways, sealing her lips and pinching her nostrils closed, then breathing into her mouth. You need to find, he said, pausing, getting ready to speak a word he couldn't avoid, her breastbone, to commence with proper chest compressions. Regularly check her neck artery for a pulse. Mr. Corker squeezed a bulb that sent air down a tube into Annie, giving her some artery action. He waited until Tom broke a sweat pushing up and down on Annie's chest, elbows locked, before he squeezed Annie's pulse bulb. Mr. Corker then alcohol wiped her mouth and had Marco and Tom change places, working them hard again. All right, who's next? Mr. Corker said as the jerks stood. Jackie, Marco said, standing. How about you let me find your breastbone and do proper chest compressions, get your pulse going. Jackie fake slapped his chest, laughed, and stepped forward, volunteering. I'll do it, she said, kneeling easily, leaning her face into Annie, taking her duties seriously. She looked amazing without even trying. She could be flirty, kind, and sensitive, take her grades seriously, and be dressed perfectly all the time. Other girls, Haley included, could juggle maybe 2 of those things, but even there, It was touch and go. Jackie floated on a cloud of her own natural amazingness. So we'll put the other characters up there. We've got Jackie and Marco. Not major characters. Jackie seems to be the pretty girl in health class. The main character seems to talk about her fondly. Marco is the jerk in class. I'm going to put bully. That's a better word than jerk, but Marco is a jerk. He is the bully in health class. I'll do compressions, I said, kneeling next to her, still feeling like a Spanish bull. This close. If I made one wrong gesture, I might send tiny Jackie flying across the room. Mr. Corker ignored the whispering chimps around us. Forget them, Jackie said, touching my arm, her skin slightly warmer than mine. We've got a life to save. I tried taking her advice, but even compressing, I heard Tom say that I was just trying to get Jackie's white girl spit in my mouth the only way it would happen. I compressed so hard that I felt like I might bust the spring in Recessa Annie's chest. Marco said I wanted to see how wide Annie's mouth opened. They speculated that my locked elbows were clogged with embedded dirt, but my skin was just naturally darker there and a few other places. When I was 7, I tried to scrub the color off my elbows so hard they blistered and bled. As I compressed Annie's chest in silence, one fist over the other, my ears burned deeper red. So he's just performing CPR, and Marco and his friends are just making fun of him in the background. They said his skin looked like clogged dirt, and then he tells us when he was 7, he tried to scrub the color off his elbows so hard his skin bled. So again, he's talking about the color of his skin. Obviously, it didn't work. Okay. Oh, I forgot, Mr. Corker said when we stopped. Recessa Annie's lips were the same frosted red that Jackie's had. He dug into his Kleenex, so Jackie had lip gloss on. He dug into his desk for Kleenex and a jar of Noxzema. Girls, and some of you guys maybe, I don't know, please wipe off any makeup before your turn. We don't want it staining Annie's skin. You want her to be normal colored for the people who come after you. Normal. Haley and I locked eyes. So lots of talk about skin color here. The teacher referred to skin color as normal, meaning white. Okay, and he and Haley looked at each other. So nobody else in the room caught that, but to them, they knew exactly. It stuck out to them, to Haley and to Hubert. Okay. After the bell, safely within the private area near our res buses, Haley came up to me. She reapplied her maroon lips and outlined their edges to make them seem smaller, like Barbie lips. How come you let those guys talk like that? She asked, pretending she hadn't chosen to be deep undercover like cops show heroes trying to spy on criminals in their hideouts. I was the only Indian there, I said, and it was out before I could slam my big scut shut. That must mean mouth. I just mean guy. I was the only Indian guy there, but she'd already joined girls from her end of the res safely in the bubble of our portable res on wheels. So he just said to Haley that she wasn't Indian. He didn't say anything because he knew she wasn't going to stand up for him in class. He would just be standing up for himself by himself. From that day forward, she wouldn't even silently sit near me. I almost wanted to expose her disguise to the new girls. She shared makeup tips with guys and guys flirted with, but I'd been followed in stores often enough to wish that I had more to say in how others saw me. On the bus, no matter where I sat, she made sure to walk past, not even snapping her deep, horse brown eyes in my direction. She wasn't going to waste energy making a face at me. The week of Thanksgiving, Recessa Annie seemed long stored back in her suitcase, and our classes were briefly segregated. We were supposed to cover a very special unit that might as well have been called line drawings of adulthood unit. The girls from my class went with Miss D'Amour, and the guys from her class joined us in Mr. Corker's room. If your parents didn't sign the permission slip, you were shipped off to the library to maybe conduct your own solo research on the puberty and reproduction unit. That week, I had a chance to talk to someone in class, Bill and Andy Cruz, two cousins I sometimes hang out with on the res, flopped down next to me. It wasn't hard for them to find seats. Between the TV chimps and other kids afraid of the big Indian, I had an armada of empty desks around me most days. Marco speculated to the other chimps that Mr. Corker might bring in Playboys. Carson Matstick's dad had more intense mags than the likes of Playboy. No way was Mr. Corker going to pass those around to a bunch of 7th grade guys. Corker shut the door and positioned his overhead projector. Was our teacher really going to talk about boners, or even weirder, say the word boner aloud? When he slapped a transparency onto the projector and turned it on, I figured we were safely away from such talk. Just like the other illustrations we'd been shown, the simple drawings didn't look like anyone's anatomy I'd ever seen. It resembled the clog drains in the liquid plumber commercials, except here, the downward drooping pipe had a stubbly rounded end. The drawing had arrows pointing to specific parts. We were each extremely well versed in these particular parts on our own, but it was safe to guess that none of us had ever used the alien words printed at the end of each arrow tip. Unlike the stomach ulcer stress illustration, the main organ in this drawing was pale pink, the color of a shrimp cocktail. Corker handed out identical worksheets, but at the end of the arrows, the words were missing. He told us to copy off the projection and memorize the new words. No improvising with colorful language now. We are young men, growing mature. I suspected that he hated this unit the most, even worse than the recent learning to spot and treat lice unit. Part of that maturity is using proper names. We wrote the new words, passed the sheets forward, and waited. The next transparency worksheet combo included the distribution of 2 slim boxes of colored pencils. I knew for sure that it was the week Corker hated most. This worksheet featured a line-drawn naked boy with generic features and similar stubby equipment. On the screen projected naked line boy, as was also shrimp cocktail pink. So he's making a note of the skin color of these diagrams that they're being shown. They're shrimp cocktail pink. Corker hit the screen with a rubber-tipped pointer and said, "This kid was our age," and that right around now changes started happening. In his most soothing voice, he assured us that these changes were perfectly natural, perfectly normal. Our voices would crack and lower, our Adam's apple would start sticking out, we might get zits, and we'd probably want to choose a deodorant to use every day, circling back to the hygiene unit. These changes had happened to me when I was 10. Even if I hadn't been a year older than everyone else in my class, this update still would have been old news to me. And now, he said, as I mentioned, this may have already started happening with some of you guys, and I don't need to know. Keep that information to yourselves, please, but this will happen. He dropped an overlay on top of Naked Pink Boy. On the screen, shapeless light brown blobs were now projected in Naked Pink Boy's pits and around the stubby pipe. Marco and Tom asked if we were going to get tans in these places that didn't usually get tan. "Come on, guys," Corker said, sighing. "You know what this is. I mean, some of you are already trying hard to start peach fuzz mustaches." He laughed a fake three-stutter burst, stroking his own bushy mustache without being aware he was. As the two slim boxes came my way, I slid a colored pencil from each and passed the boxes to Bill and Andy. The boxes were not assortment packs. I looked at the two pencils and the words printed along the slim lines, flesh and burnt sienna. The three of us in our tiny res desk looked at each other and shrugged. Okay. Again, he's pointing out the skin color. Flesh, which is obviously, if you've seen a box of crayons, that flesh color is a peach colored. And burnt sienna is a brown color. So we have the flesh color as if there's only one color of flesh. And then, of course, the color that our main character is picking up to color in his health diagram is burnt sienna. So he's pointing out here that on the crayons, it's as if there's only one color of flesh. And the crayon that is closest to his color of flesh is actually called burnt sienna. So that's another important thing. I'm going to put that down here. Burnt sienna, flesh, and burnt sienna. All right, I'm going to stop there. You're going to go on to see what he does and then how he addresses this with the teacher in class.